Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Robert. Thank you. I can see there's a lot of great questions already coming in. If anyone really wants to highlight their question, please feel free to put up your hand. But just to mix things up a little bit, I'm actually going to go straight to table 11, because there are two questions there, one from Luke and one from Anne. If we can get the microphones to table 11, and we'll take those questions straight away. Oh, you were the table that was hogging Bernie, so maybe you've already got your questions asked,
Yeah,
but we should hear it. Thanks, Luke.
We did hear Bernie's response there, but for everybody else in the room, I suppose, we just asked, can we hear some specific examples of the nature-based solutions?
And if so, our panel, Bernie, do you want to share that?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. And as I say, this is something we're really trying to champion within LawPro. But I think what we're really trying to do is influence the planning system so that when any developer applies for planning, that there is conditions within planning to include nature-based actions within their consent. So that could be things like rainwater collection systems, rainwater harvesting, grassed paved parking areas. It could be things like green roofs, etc. So ways to capture water when it falls, particularly when you think about the deluges of rain we tend to get in more recent times. Capture that, slow the flow, allow that absorption within those different solution systems so that you're not getting this big impact into our collection systems, into our networks that collect water.
I probably could add an example to that. You will have heard that sediment is a big issue for many of our rivers. In fact, it's what we describe as a master stressor because it has immediate and long-term effects, and we can easily deploy nature-based solutions to address that problem. And part of it involves slowing the flow so that the sediment falls out of solution, introducing vegetation into some of the drainage networks, for example.
Okay. Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Bernie. Anne, we'll take your question as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. If a loss of biodiversity is occurring in rivers and lakes, is the same happening in our soils? How is this affecting food quality?
Thank you, Anne. Would any of our panel like to take that one? James?
It's one we know so little about in terms of our soils. But from what we do know is we see that soil quality is deteriorating, and we're seeing the loss of biodiversity within our soils as well. Obviously, what we eat depends on the soil it comes from, through the vegetation to the animals or through the crops. So this is the links between the actual nutritional quality of the food and the soil quality is very much at the frontiers of research at the moment, and we still don't know the answers, but we can make assumptions about the quality and the quality of our food. But fundamentally, the quality of our soils, all our nutrients are recycled through our soils. If the nutrient cycling system in our soils breaks down, we have to bring in more external nutrients to replace that. That often is in the form of chemical fertilizers that are based on fossil fuels. So we have this vicious circle. But if we want to re-establish the natural cycles within our soils, we have to be less dependent on external inputs and more dependent on the biological system. But there is this trade-off that people are worried about at the moment, that as we try and restore our soil quality, will there be an initial fall-off in the productivity of our soils and the amount of food we can produce until we build back up our biological systems within the soil in that transition from our dependence on chemical inputs to our dependence on the biological systems within the soil. I'm hoping that's not too complicated, but there's so much we don't know. We know an awful lot more about the water environment than we know about the soils at the moment.
Okay, thanks, James. So I just saw 4 raised, and then I'll go to 8, and I'll take some other questions after that. So table 4, thank you.
Hi, my name's Emma. We were just wondering here, who's actually responsible for enforcing the penalties? You know, when people are enforcing these gap rules and that, and eventually would they end up in court, or how far does it actually go?
Bernie, thanks.
Yeah, with the good agricultural practice regulations, it's the local authorities that have responsibility for enforcement of the regulations. So they have to carry out inspections and then act accordingly on their findings related to inspections. Now, with local authorities, particularly that task falls to the environment sections. And it's fair to say that they have been significantly under-resourced for many years, okay? So that means there's been a significant drop-off in the number of inspections being carried out by local authorities over the last decade, particularly in the last 5 years, okay? And that's something that was spoken about by Donal, that's hopefully going to be reversed. There are a number of business cases and other programs happening at the moment to change that. But irrespective of that, in terms of the inspections and the findings then, generally the local authorities would prefer to work with the farmers to get the solutions. That's the win-win situation for everyone, okay? But if it becomes protracted, then they do sometimes cross-report, is what it's called, to the Department of Agriculture, and they will look to see what penalty might need to be put on that farmer for the particular issue that has arisen. Sometimes it does end up in court. But generally the feedback from local authorities is they do not want to get into the court system at all, because generally the fines are very low out the other end. So there is really, the sanction, let's say, the dissuasive sanction isn't really there, so.
Just to follow up on that, Mary Dobbs is going to speak briefly to us tomorrow about the courts again, because there has been a movement on that in the last week from government, so we'll come back to that. There's a lot of questions on here that are really pertinent, and I'm afraid we're not going to get to all of them. If I can get the microphone to table 1. Connor, thank you very much. Anka has a question, and I might just bundle a couple of questions in together to give to the panel, just in the interest of time then after that. Anka?
Hello, my name is Anka. We have a question here. Are all the nitrates from fertilizers, or some of them are from animal waste? Are all of them coming from excess use of fertilizers?
No. In fact, most of the nitrate actually getting into water is coming from grazing animals and coming from urine patches in particular. And the second main source, that would be the main source. Second main source would be inorganic fertilizer that's applied. But there is an effort made now to use less what's called calcium ammonium nitrate and to use protected urea. And there would be less leaching of nitrate from protected urea compared to what was used in the past, which was calcium ammonium nitrate, or farmers would know as CAN. So, yeah, they're the two main sources.
Thanks, Donal. Now, there's a lot of questions that we'll be able to definitely get follow-up from our panellists, and we'll share that in the members' area. One thing that I think is maybe pertinent here is from Fiona in Table 3. Who would be responsible for developing and implementing an emergency solution recovery? And another question, sorry, I've just lost it now there myself. What are the solutions that the experts on the panel, in the experts' opinion, what are the barriers to the implementation of current solutions? That's from Louise in Table 6. So what are the barriers to current solutions? And if you were to put in an emergency plan, who would actually govern that, if I can ask our panellists that? Mary?
I suppose I ought to speak to the plan. I think it would have to bring together all stakeholders or representative stakeholders with an interest or any connection to water. At the moment, I think what Donal highlighted is that we have a very fragmented approach to the management of water, and this is probably why water quality is slipping. So we need, I suppose, common overall objective across all of those sectors, and that's what an emergency plan would entail. We have a river basin management plan. It speaks about ambition. I've looked at the plan. While parts of it are good, I don't think it has the level of ambition that is needed to actually address declining water quality. And that's why I propose we need this emergency plan, because we're at this point where if we're going to make a difference, we've got to do it now.
And Mary, would that be is it a government plan from Central Taoiseach's office? Is it a Department of Agriculture plan? Who do you think at the moment is best placed, or does it need a different oversight?
It probably will need a different oversight, bringing together all of the actors that are involved, particularly at the policy level, and I think that's where we're probably failing most. And a plan that will put the resources in place to enable what is required on the ground.
Donald, yes?
Can I just give an example again of where the joined up thinking and planning is needed? And it's the one I mentioned there about planting trees. There's going to be a big effort now in order to sequester carbon, to plant more trees, and it's absolutely essential. But if you plant those trees in the right place, as I mentioned earlier, if we can make that happen, that could mean, I believe, a really significant difference to our water quality, because it would intercept the phosphate and intercept the sediment. But a decision has to be made that if we're going to plant more trees, we're going to make a big effort to plant them where it will also have the benefit for water quality and terrestrial biodiversity as well, I suppose.
And I suppose what we need to think is that there are so many sectors where water is central to the activities, but they haven't come together to really think about how are we going to protect this resource and to put in place measures that maximise the benefits, not only for ourselves, but for biodiversity as well, carbon sequestration, etc.
Thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you very much for the questions. As I said, we will follow up on these and we'll get answers to the ones that aren't answered specifically now, because they're ones that we will definitely be able to get answers back to you very quickly. But I really want to thank sincerely Professor Mary Kelly Quinn, Donald Daly and Dr. Bernie White as well for their contributions this morning. Thank you.